Hurrdat Sports Radio. I'm Ravi, Lulla, not Andrew Rogers, Elijah Herbel here with me today. Sorry, that's a habit. We are live on AM 590, ESPN Omaha, and ESPN Tri-Cities. We are joined now by the play-by-play voice for Nebraska basketball. That is the legendary Kent Pavelka. Kent, how are you this morning?
Doing great. Hey, thanks for inviting me on the air. I like to listen to you guys, and I really enjoy what Hurrdat is doing and all the various enterprises. So, yeah, it's good to be on with you.
Well, thank you, Kent. And Kent joins us on the Warhorse Sportsbook Hotline. Kent, jumping into Nebraska basketball this year, I'm curious. I know you've been following this team for quite a while as the play-by-play voice, and you've seen a lot of different versions of Nebraska basketball. So far, 8-2 on the season, has struggled a little bit against the better competition on their schedule, though they got a big win against Michigan State on Sunday. How has this team performed compared to your expectations coming into the year?
Well, I don't think anybody really had any kind of a feel before they got together and finally got all their players together in the summer and went over to Spain. I saw a lot of potential the very first time I watched them practice this summer. And then they bowled out to a 7-0 record, and like you intimated, maybe not against some of the better teams that they were eventually going to face. And then when they met up with the Creighton Blue Jays, that was a comeuppance, no question about it. All the credit in the world to Creighton that night. Then the question was, I saw a lot of potential and a lot of talent, and we could talk about that. But after that Creighton game, we wondered, does this team have any resiliency? How quickly can they come back? And in the first half against Minnesota, the very next game, I thought they played their best basketball all year long, and they're very impressive when they're playing well. Second half, the bottom fell out again, and then you wondered again, do they have any resiliency? Well, that was answered when they beat up Michigan State at their own game in terms of physicality. And I don't know if you got to see that or listen to it. It was really impressive. And even though Michigan State is having a rough year, they still have a lot of talent. They were preseason top 5 team. At any rate, now we saw some resiliency, and now what I'm looking for is consistency. And that'll be tested at Kansas State this Sunday, I beg your pardon.
It's Kent Pavelka with us here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, talking Nebraska basketball. And Kent, one of the things that I think some people forget about with this Husker basketball team this season, it's a lot of guys that have not played much basketball together. Whenever you think back to the difference in the second half of Minnesota to the entire game against Michigan State, do you think you saw this team gelling and coming together? Because that's a big part of basketball, is being able to know what your teammate is going to do, expect when he's going to be able to cut, really just that team nature of basketball. Did you see a step forward in the right direction in that aspect in the Michigan State game, or do you still think there's more work to be done in that area?
Well, I think that this team is still looking for, like I said, some consistency and really a measure of confidence in terms of, what those kinds of, the second half at Minnesota and the Creighton game do to your psyche, collective psyche. Most everybody is having to play with new players now in this paradigm of the NIL. Everybody's going to have a new roster pretty much every year, save for just a few exceptions. So I don't think it's so much that as it is, playing collectively together and just having that sense about you as a team that, you've got the answer no matter how hard you get punched in the face. And I don't mean to turn this into, a bunch of cliches, but that's the best way I can describe it. These guys, when they met adversity, I don't know that they knew how to answer it. And I think they're learning that. And so, they go forward now and play a tough game Sunday at Kansas State. I look at the Big Ten, and every night is just going to be up for grabs, with the exception maybe, Purdue, I think, is a cut above everybody else. But I think it's a lot of evenly matched teams in the conference. So those intangibles, that growth factor, in terms of being able to, play relentlessly for 40 minutes, no matter what happens to you. I think the team that is able to put themselves together in that respect, the teams that put themselves together in that respect are going to be the ones that play, after Selection Sunday.
Ken, I'm glad you brought up the Big Ten as a whole, because as I've watched this year, you mentioned the Purdue as probably kind of that cut above everybody else, and I tend to agree with you there. But as you've watched Nebraska this year and you've seen some of the other teams in the Big Ten as well, where do you think Nebraska, if things, I guess, go well or they continue to progress throughout the year, where do you think Nebraska what range do you think they can slot into that Big Ten conference?
Well, I think if things go really well and they figure it out and, don't have this yo-yo-like phenomenon happen all year long in terms of their, ability to maintain a level of performance, I think they can finish in the upper half, certainly, and maybe the upper third, because I think Purdue is alone in terms of its obvious talent advantage over everybody else. I think Wisconsin's right there, right behind them. I think Illinois is really talented, but you dip deeper than that, and I think, like I said, I think it's a team that figures it out, and I think Nebraska has a chance.
It's Ken Pavelka with us here, Hurrdat Sports Radio. And I don't know if I need to introduce Ken. If you can't recognize him from the voice, that's on you. But Ken, I want to get your thoughts on what we saw specifically on Sunday with the starting lineup. Josiah Allick unavailable on Sunday, and Juwan Gary got thrust into the starting lineup. Seemed to go pretty well on Sunday. Do you see that being a plan for Fred Hoiberg moving forward? Juwan Gary in the starting lineup, Josiah Allick off the bench, or do you think we're going to have a return to normalcy in that regard?
I think I'm just guessing here because I have not talked to anybody or been at practice since Sunday, and I don't know, but I suspect you're going to see Josiah Allick back in the starting lineup for a couple of reasons. He didn't do anything to deserve a demotion, but I think you've got a piece coming off the bench with the way they have it, the way it was before Sunday, that you're not going to have that if you change the lineup. So I just guess that it's going to go back to the way it was. And to me, it's so valid when coaches point out that who starts is an overrated kind of concept anyway, because, like coaches will say, you want to know who I think my best players are, watch who's in the game in the last 5 minutes rather than the first 5 minutes. But Gary is a really, really nice talent, and he gives them another element. But that's nice to have coming off the bench, 4 or 5 minutes into the game.
Ken, I got to tell you, as a former basketball coach, I totally agree with the last 5 minutes versus the first 5 minutes. Real hard to convince 18-year-olds of that. I'm going to be honest with you.
But I think Gary has bought into it. Last year, C.J. Wilcher bought into it.
Sure.
If these guys respect their coaches in terms of seeing dividends for playing the way they're being coached, then they buy in and they get it. And if they're getting their 17 to 22 minutes, I think most of them are going to be satisfied as long as they're playing and they're winning.
Ken, we're talking about Juwan Gary here, and his efficiency this season, although only in 7 games so far, has been dramatically improved from any other point in his career. You see it in the field goal percentage, you see it in the 3-point percentage, you see it in his points per game. What have you seen from him that's led to that, and how sustainable do you think some of those numbers are as we go throughout the year?
Well, I think that the question about Juwan all along since he transferred from Alabama is, can he shoot the ball?
Sure.
I mean, you can't question his physicality, his athleticism, his motor, the way he can defend. Now, can he make shots outside the paint? And when he came here, he wasn't a real good shooter. But I think this is a real feather in the cap of Fred Hoiberg, and should, impress recruits, because he can bring people in here and develop them. And I think Gary's got a chance. I mean, with that shoulder, he came in with a bad shoulder, and that affected his perimeter shooting, his jump shot. But they worked with him even during the time last winter when he had the cast on and all that, on his balance and whatnot, and really shooting with one arm, and that served him well. But, at the same time, the last thing I want to see is Juwan jacking threes in the first minute of the game,
It's Kent Pavelka with us here, Hurrdat Sports Radio. And Kent, whenever you specifically look ahead to Sunday in Kansas State, this Kansas State team is not the same team that they were last year, but they're still dangerous. The crazy stat to me this season is in 10 games, already 4 overtime games for Kansas State. They have won all 4 of those, the first being against Providence, another overtime win against Oral Roberts, and then against North Alabama, and finally against Villanova. Already 4 overtime games, all 4 wins for Kansas State. Whenever you look at what this Kansas State team is this season, I'm not sure how far into your game prep you've dove. That's the word. What do you think this Kansas State squad is this season? What challenges do they present Nebraska?
Well, of course, they just lost certainly one of their best players. Tomlin's been excused from participating. I think you've all read about that. 6'11" kid was really instrumental in their Elite Eight season last year, and they really miss Noel at point guard. I mean, who wouldn't? He was really different and special. And then Keontae Johnson, who really should have been playing for Nebraska last year. Don't get me started on that. But those 3 guys aren't there. At the same time, I've been to Ahern a zillion times. It's been a while since I broadcast from there, and it can get. I mean, it can be in a den of iniquity in terms of atmosphere. So it's going to be tough. I mean, Villanova right now, maybe not the best they've ever been, but just like Michigan State, still very talented. They couldn't win there. It's going to be hard. They've got, they've got really good players. 3 of them right at 16 points a game. I think it's just the same old story. Nebraska, the Huskers have got to, wash, rinse, and repeat the way they played and the way it all felt while they played against Michigan State, and they got to do it for 40 minutes, and if they do, I think it'll be a good game.
Ken, based on the way that game at Minnesota went, how important do you think it is that Nebraska is able to go and get a Power 5 win away from Pinnacle Bank Arena?
Oh, I think it would be a huge win Sunday. Because, again, if the Huskers are able to, at the end of the day in early March, have fared well enough in the Big Ten to be in the conversation, a win against Kansas State and at Kansas State in non-conference play could put them over the it could be the thing that gets them in the tournament. And I know people think, it's pretty early to be talking about that, but hope springs eternal. And I really like this team. I love the players individually, collectively. I love the coaching staff. I think they've got more potential than any time, certainly since Fred's been there. And I'm just real hopeful. And I this would be a huge win.
As you look at it now, maybe an early preview of your keys to the game, can you give me a guy or 2 that you think needs to step up on Sunday for Nebraska to get it done?
Oh, boy. I think I'm
definitely putting you on the spot here, Kent. I do apologize for that.
That's fine. I'm just thinking about it. Rink Mast was kind of AWOL in the Creighton game, and he was huge Sunday against Michigan State. Reminded me of Derek Walker a little bit, the way he was passing the ball, wound up, I think, with 4 or 5 assists. I think that, he needs to be as effective game in and game out as he was, more effective like he was against Michigan State than how he, just wasn't a factor against Creighton. Bryce Williams scored 17 points, I think it was, in the first half against Minnesota and 1 in the second half. I mean, this is a guy that I think has probably the most potential to play on the next level, and he just needs a little more motor, in my opinion. A little, just out of his personality, to be as aggressive and forceful at all times as he needs to be. But the guy I think that might be the key to the game and the season really is Jamarcus Lawrence. He's put in a tough situation, moving from the 2 guard to point guard, and he's that's a lot to ask of a guy. And to also, oh, by the way, we still want you to score 15 points a game. But I'm seeing improvement with him. The longer I talk about this, I'll mention all 13 players here. Right.
Kent, if you could snap your fingers and fix a certain spot on this team, would it be getting a true point guard in for this team? Because it does kind of seem like that is the missing piece to sort of getting them to that next level.
No question about it. I think that like I said, I think that Jamarcus is kind of a key. If he can continue to develop, and he's really good defensively, and his assist numbers are good. But yeah, Aaron Eulis was the guy, and then you got the gambling thing with him.
Mm-hmm.
And I could go on and on this year and over the summer, and guys that were near misses, and how about catching a break? Everything falls into place, and you've got all the pieces that look like you have a chance to get these guys, and then it doesn't work out for whatever reason. But yeah, you're trying to do it, and everybody's got a problem at this level. Warts in terms of not having all the pieces you want. But I think that's it for Nebraska. And I think that also that point guard is kind of in this day and age in college basketball, being a point guard is not what it used to be. It's not the guy that brings the ball across the timeline
mm-hmm.
and pounds the ball to sleep. And let's get it back to him. And on every possession before somebody, he's got to be the guy that assists on the shot. Once you get it across the timeline, push the ball and see if you've got anything in early offense, then everybody in this offense is kind of a point guard, a point player every time he catches the ball, in terms of looking for the guy with the best shot. So I don't know if that makes any sense or not, but that would be, and you talk about how deep you are, all of a sudden you get third through the season and you think, yeah, I don't know if we're as deep as we thought, that kind of thing. Everybody's got that problem.
Can't really fast you before we get you out. I got to get your thoughts. I was going to maybe ask, do you have any insight in the quarterback situation? I'll let that lie for now, but Husker volleyball plays tonight at 6:00. You got any big plans for that Husker volleyball game as they're taking on Pitt in the Final Four?
You want a quarterback comment and a volleyball comment?
We can leave the court. We can let the quarterback comment lie. Everyone's got a quarterback thought right now.
Do I look like John Baylor or Greg Sharp? No, can you believe the phenomenon that John Cook has created? Like Tom Osborne used to say, he used to characterize Nebraska football as, I think this was a great, ad lib on his part. He said, this thing that we have concocted for ourselves, this point of attraction, and the whole state's focused on it. Yeah, that's what volleyball is. So I sure hope that they can get it done here in 2 more matches, and then if you want to talk about Nebraska football and NIL, I'd be happy to be a co-host with you for like the next 2 or 3 years. I got a lot of opinions on what's going on in athletics. When I get done doing this, I want to do a podcast and be able to really say what I think about things.
Well, Ken, we may have a spot for you over at
KP Uncensored.
We may have a spot for you over at Hurrdat. Don't tease me like that, Ken.
Tell them to check the balance in their checkbook, and you've got my number.
Well, Ken, before we let you go, I do just have to say, we mentioned football there. Obviously, you were the football play-by-play voice, and before that, the color commentary voice for Nebraska football for so long. For me personally, it's just a pleasure to talk to you. You're kind of the voice of my childhood. I used to listen to all those games and you broadcast them on the radio during those glory years in the mid-90s. So,
and I'll second that. It wasn't football for me. I'm a little younger than Ravi, so it was growing up, driving in the car, listening to Husker basketball. I have just great memories listening to you on the radio. I was a little starstruck whenever I got the text yesterday. We have KP on tomorrow, so it's been a pleasure.
You guys are too kind. You really are, and it's all been a great pleasure for me, and I'm just fortunate enough to be able to keep doing it at this point. So I appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
That's Kent Pavelka. Thank you. Kent Pavelka, play-by-play voice of Nebraska basketball, formerly play-by-play voice of Nebraska football. I'm not even exaggerating. I used to, because people your age forget a little bit. The games didn't all used to be on TV. Like, I literally would be in my backyard listening on a little Walkman radio to Kent calling Nebraska games. So it always is a pleasure when we get to talk to Kent. We appreciate him giving us the time there as well.
One of my favorite memories growing up listening to Kent, it still stands out distinctly in my memory. It would have been, back when basketball games were still played at Bob Devaney, it was number 2 Texas coming to town. I can't remember who was number 1 that week, but number 1 had fallen. So Texas was the presumptive number 1 team beginning the next week. And Nebraska basketball comes in to Bob Devaney that day. It's rocking. I'm listening on the radio. The game was on ESPN that day, but I'm listening to KP on the radio, and Nebraska is able to take down Texas in a low-scoring game. If I remember correctly, that was Kevin Durant's freshman year.
I think it would have been 07, I think, because that would have been the only time, I think, because when you were saying that, them number 2, presumptive number 1, I think that was 07. And that would have been Kevin Durant's freshman year as well. But the other thing that I remember, this is a super random memory. I remember being at my dad's software store listening to Kent Pavelka call, I believe it was the 95 NIT championship when Nebraska basketball won the NIT. So Kent's been a huge part of my life as a Husker fan growing up, and really appreciate him giving us the time and joining us here.
Nice.
Can you, do we have the got it in there somewhere, Shane? The Kent Pavelka, got it. Anywhere?
Is there still the Kent Pavelka soundboard?
The what?
There used to be the Kent Pavelka soundboard online with all the different Kent Pavelka sounds. That was always the best.
There we go.
There it is.
That's the one. Sean on the YouTube says he was actually at that Texas-Nebraska game. Best basketball environment he's ever seen. Good stuff there from our guy Kent Pavelka on the Warhorse Sportsbook hotline. Real quick, I want to tell you about Warhorse Sportsbook. They're the best place in Nebraska to place your sports bets. You can do so in Lincoln at the casino or at Horseman's Park here in Omaha. You can place live bets, props, parlays, straight bets on nearly every major sporting event. Warhorse Sportsbook has you covered. Make sure you get the Warhorse Sportsbook app or visit warhorsecasino.com/sportsbook for all the details and full house rules. Warhorse Sportsbook, no bets, no glory. Coming up next, we're going to get a little Hurrdat hot seat. Get to know Elijah a little better here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back